Hello, this is Joy Hancox again, and today I'm going to talk about the 1804 illustration that we've talked about in video 9. Now, I first published my first book in 1992. When I'm speaking about the illustration that I'm going to talk about now, 1804, it was after I'd published my last book, The Hidden Chapter, in 2011. And so, having introduced that and given you a sort of a time lapse where you can sort of consider that, I'm now going to tell you what I consider is another surprising element, it was to me anyway, about the illustration which we're going to talk about now, which I've called 1804. Now, that wasn't too difficult because at the top in the left hand side of the illustration it does actually say 1804. How did I come by it then? Well, in September 2013 we're talking about, so it's some years ago, I had a phone call from a colleague, Sylvia. I've mentioned her before, of course, in conjunction with the Nuremberg engraving that we talked about in video 1. Now, I had this phone call from her. She was wanting to tell me about an illustration that was coming up for auction on eBay in September. And she thought I would be interested in it, and so unfortunately I had not an account with eBay at the time, but I was able to look at it, and I could see immediately in the advertisement that there was a symbol that was connected with my research, and I'd had access to that symbol years before. I will talk about that later. But as soon as I saw this, I thought, oh, I need to purchase it myself. But it was an auction, and I had no access to the eBay account. So actually what happened was that she and her husband bought it, and then they allowed me to purchase it from them. So now I had it. I had asked them for everything to do with that sale, not only the envelope that it had been sent to them in, but all the paperwork that accompanied it. When I looked at the bidding, which I did look at, there was one price that attracted my attention very, very quickly, because it seemed to me a very unusual bidding price, but I'm not familiar with the procedure that people account for their own bidding in this kind of world. I'd never bought anything from eBay, and I'd not sold anything by eBay, so I hadn't got an account. But this seemed to be a date to me, because I recognised it as a date, and the price was actually £17.62, and I thought, who would bid £17.62? I thought, I saw it as a date. What did that mean to me then? It was the date of John Byrom's death. He died in September and it says in his documentation 1763. But here we have 1762. And of course the calendar was very iffy at that time. Some people used the old calendar and some people use the new. So 1762 was very, very close, in my opinion, to 1763 and could be one or the other. However, later, and it was much later, I learned that also it was the death date 1762 to George Anson. Now, that won't mean anything to the general viewer at this point in time, not in conjunction with me anyway, but the viewer may recognise George Anson as in connection with Shugborough estate in Staffordshire. And George Anson did come to have a very, very, very important, significant inclusion in this study to do with this allegory. The symbol that I had recognised in the publicity, I had seen in Henry Lincoln's book, The Holy Place. And you can see here, this was published in 1991, the year before the Byrom collection had been published. And the symbol that I had seen in the publicity, I'm going to do it backwards really, this was this sign here. This had appeared in the publicity as advertised on eBay. When I saw that PS sign, I remembered it, and I saw it in the book, and you've seen the picture of it in the book, but I remembered it with a degree of clarity, I can assure you, as being part of the gravestone of Marie Le Blanchefort, whose gravestone had the date 17th of January 1781. Now, that symbol on that gravestone was considered very, very important by Henry Lincoln, and this is why he had singled it out and placed it on a page in his book. But at the same time, here it was in the allegory that we're talking about, called 1804. You will see it quite clearly placed. And I knew this book. I knew the contents of it before I purchased the allegory, which we are calling 1804. Now, as I said, that this gravestone was near to the church of Rennes-la-Château, which Henry Lincoln was really very, very interested in. And of course, now I have this particular allegory to study. I am saying that this became a focus of my work for some particular time. Now, Henry Lincoln was one of three authors. Henry Lincoln, Michael Bagent, and Richard Lee were popularly referred to as the Three Holies because they collectively had written a book called The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. And how did I come to know these very well-known authors of their day? It happened this way. I had known Sir Miles Huntingdon Whiteley, grandson of Stanley Baldwin, the former Prime Minister, very well, in conjunction with my Byrom researches. And I received through the post a copy of the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail from him. He was the person that sent me my first copy. I had not known about this book beforehand. And why had he sent it to me? Now, in the studies that we had talked about to do with Byrom. He had known, or he came to know, that John Byrom was a friend of Charles Ratcliffe. Now, that won't mean anything to the viewer at the moment, but Sir Miles recognised that their friendship was very significant. But he had obviously known this book and knew it very well. Here is a page from that book, and it's page 133. And if you look at it carefully, you will see that it's a list of Grand Masters or named males, well, men and women, but there are only one or two women in it. But it's a list of Grand Masters that go back to about the 1200s. And it's the last name on that page is Jean Cocteau. And he is one of the Grand Masters of this. And what is this group? And what is this list of? It's the Grand Masters of a secret society called the Priory of Zion. And if you look down the page, you will see one of the Grand Masters is Charles Ratcliffe. And Sir Miles knew that he was a friend of John Byrom's, and yet John Byrom was not mentioned at all in this study, which was an investigative study of a certain part of their mystique, and it was a story of their investigations into a town called in France Rennes-la-Château, and these were the Grand Masters that were connected with that Priory of Zion, a secret society that was centred, a lot of their work was centred around Rennes-la-Château. And so Miles had obviously read the book and found it of great interest, and considered and wondered why there was no mention of John Byrom in it. So actually he'd sent me the copy, and I read it with great interest, and I wrote to the authors to question why and how they had not included John Byrom, because I thought he should have been there. I myself thought he would have been there. And actually, there was no reply. I did not get a reply. So I often visited London to do research at the British Library, and on this one occasion I went to a nearby antique shop which was nearby the British Library, and I actually had gone for a particular reason. I'd gone to look for a book about the traditions of colour and how artists used colour in their books. I did not go particularly in connection with this book at all. But whilst I was in the shop, the actual owner asked if he could help me, and I said, well, I was looking for a book on colour, and he helped me to find one. And then I pointed to the book, The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, which was on his bookshelves. So he said, well, my wife is going to a conference at Shugborough that they are conducting, Richard Lee and Michael Bajan. So he said, I'll give her a ring and I'll see what the details of this conference are. There may be some, you may be able to go yourself if you're anxious to get in touch with them. So he did that, and then I found myself going to Shubra to their conference. And during question time, I asked them why it was that they had not included John Byrom in their studies. And I have to say, it was Richard Lee, a very, you know, uh, interesting looking person. He comes from Mexico in America, and he came to see me after the meeting, and he said to me, do you ever go to London to study? And I said, yes, I do quite often. And he said, well, I wonder whether whether I could have your address and we could arrange a meeting. And I said to him, well, I've written to you before and you have not replied. So if I can have your address, you can have mine. And we actually exchanged addresses, and then eventually we did meet up in London, and actually he became we set up almost a study group surrounding John Byrom and the characters that they were interested in themselves. So I had come to meet Richard and Michael at the Shubra, and then, of course, we had meetings with Richard particularly in London when I went to study at the British Library or British Museum. And on one of these occasions, I needed to go to the Warburg Institute. That was not very far from the British Library, but I had a meeting with the librarian there. I wanted to talk to them or to him about the Byrom collection, because I'd been to various universities without success, and when I say without success, all of them had said to me, and this was almost uniformly, that come back and tell us when you know a little bit more about them. So here I am going to the Warburg Institute on this occasion, meeting the librarian. And when he saw these drawings, he said to me, well, I think I'm going to give you a library ticket so that you can come here and study, but I think you should meet Sir Lionel Brett. And I said, who's Sir Lionel Brett? And he said he was a very, very distinguished senior Freemason of the period. Well, at that time, I did not feel that I wanted to engage with that institution, not necessarily. And so I had my reasons, but I did not think necessarily that I wished to follow that advice. And after that meeting, he'd asked me actually if I would go back and see somebody else that following day, which I did. But after this particular meeting, we went back to our hotel and we were having a meeting with Richard Lee, part of the Holy Blood Trio. And I mentioned this to him, what had taken place at the Warburg Institute. And he said to me, I know just the person that you should see, of Freemasonry. We know him very well. And that was Neville Barker Cryer. And it was Richard that set up the meeting where within 10 days Neville Barker Cryer was making his first visit to my home here in Manchester. It's not quite so sunny here today, but here we are again, and I'm about to continue with my story about 1804. Now, we're at the stage now where I have to say that when this illustration arrived at my house through the post with the envelopes and all the paperwork, I had no idea that when I took it out, that it was a page from a Bible. And on the reverse of the illustration was the most extraordinary uh, engraving of the feeding of the 5,000. And having recognized that it was a page from a Bible, I am now going to give you the details of that Bible that this illustration was taken from. And of course, at the top of the engraving of the feeding of the 5,000, it does say, "And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed to the 5,000." And it's from St. John chapter 6, verse 11. Now, this page, I was absolutely fascinated that it was an actual page from a Bible. So I thought, which Bible is this then? And so, after very careful investigation, I'm going to give you the details of the Bible that the page is taken from. It's from the Southwell's Universal Family Bible, and it was published in 1784 to 5. Actually, I'm interrupting my quote now because I hunted to see whether I could find a picture of the Bible itself, and I did find a copy that was for sale in America, and it was $650, and it gave the size of it and everything. But we don't need to talk about that. This was a page then from Southwell's Universal Family Bible, as I say. And who was Southwell then? Apparently, it was a man by the name of Henry Southwell, who lived in from 1729 to 1779, and he died aged 50 years. Now, who was this man? I needed to look him up. Apparently, he was, and I have to quote what I found, and anybody else can look up the same. He was a Protestant fanatic, focusing on the injustices to Protestants worldwide, and he published a book on Christian martyrdom in 1765. Now, I really had not heard of this man before, and I did not know anything about his publications. But apparently, he was of Magdalen College, Cambridge, and he was a rector of Asterby in Lincolnshire, a church in Lincolnshire. And his parents, he was the son of Edward Southwell and Jane Dimmock. Now, I recognise the Dimmock name because the Dimmock family, and apparently his mother was a member of the Dimmock family, who were the King's Champion family, going back to the Norman conquest of 1066. And as the King's Champion family, a member of that family, she would be familiar of the procedures that were carried out by the King's Champion. Now, I need to just mention this because they were the standard bearers of the coronation of the kings dating back to the Norman conquest. And strangely enough, we've talked about Nertons in Tintern being very much connected with my research. And we've talked about the Lodge family in connection with the Tintern allegory. But Oliver Lodge, who apparently who's very closely connected with Tintern Nertons, he was the nephew of Samuel Lodge, who was the resident rector for Skivensbury. The Dimmock family lived at Skivensbury in Lincolnshire, and that was their residence through the centuries. And the Dimmock family, would you believe it, had their history written by, if you like, Samuel Lodge, and he was the nephew of Oliver Lodge, who had very close connections with Tintern and the Nertons. And so this was, if you like, another coincidence that was connected with the purchase of this 1804 allegory that we're going to talk about. But Henry Southwell was the author and connected very much with the putting together of the Bible from which this page was taken. That is very, very important and significant. I did not know that until I received the actual copy of the allegory 1804 itself. Having looked at the 1804, and it will be clear that I have already made a connection with the Notre Dame French Church in London, and Jean Cocteau had been commissioned to complete this mural, and he had completed it very carefully at the request of the ambassador to London, and he completed it from the 3rd of November to the 11th of November in 1959. It was placed on the left-hand side of the church in an alcove, and there it is positioned to this day. Now, I want to talk a bit about this altar representation that is unique to Jean Cocteau. And I want to describe it because it is very, very relevant when I start to talk about the 1804 allegory that was personal to me and that I had purchased. I had recognized and associated them as one connected with the other, as we will have gathered, and I hope you have already. Now, in this mural, there are Roman soldiers present at the crucifixion of Christ, and we have Christ's feet and legs can be seen at the bottom of the cross. To the left of this mural is a self-portrait of Cocteau, and to the right, opposite him, on the right-hand corner, I identify the figure as Percy Lorraine with the fish eyes, who was a personal friend of Cocteau. And I need to remind the viewer that I've already said it in the last video. He was the brother of Eustace Lorraine, who has a monument outside the Museum of Stonehenge, having crashed his plane in 1912. Now, Here we have then Percy Lorraine as a personal illustrated and demonstrated to the right corner of the Cocteau mural in the French church. As I demonstrated in video 9, Percy Lorraine, I identify him as the figure in the memorial of Jean Cocteau himself, and it can be recognized in his memorial, which is situated in Milly-la-Forêt in France. Back to the French mural. Actually, the Roman soldiers, if one looks at them very hard, you know, I am commenting on it today, but it looks to me as though their hands have been separated from their arms. If that is the case, then Cocteau is reminding us in his mural that there is something amiss with the convention of the traditions of the genealogy of what he's wanting to represent here in this mural. Because if the Roman soldiers have not got hands attached to their arms, I am reminded myself, if you like, of the St. Matthew quote, chapter 5, verse 30, which can be seen in my Tintin allegory. If thy right hand offend thee, cut it off. Are we looking at something that here in this mural of Cocteau, where he is finding the Roman soldiers carrying out something that he does not think is proper and appropriate? Can I just return to the Cocteau image in the bottom left hand side of the mural? Because he seems to have a falcon or a bird, certainly, at his shoulder. And I am reminded, and I was reminded by, if you like, the filmmakers, and it was Julie actually, that did comment on it herself. And it reminded her of the, as it did me, the altarpiece in the Tintin allegory, which was on the St. Michael's Church altar, which was part of the relics in St. Denis, where the Merovingian burials are, there were quite a few buried there, and this eagle that was on the Tintin altar was found and used, and that's where it was spent centuries of time. So did Cocteau know about all of that? So here we have certainly a bird linked with him in the altarpiece of reflection of his own personal choice in the combination of that mural in that church at that time. And now, having spoken about the altarpiece of Jean Cocteau's in the London church, we need to turn to the allegory 1804 that I purchased. And I would like to make some comments which reflect that I believe firmly that it was Jean Cocteau's work that was carried out at the same time as he was completing the London church mural. Now, we've already spoken about it being a page from a Bible, but now we must look at some of the detail of that. On the top left hand side, it says 1804, 7 Rue de la Guillotine. Now, what does that mean and what does that tell us? It appears that on the 2nd of December 1804, Napoleon was crowned Emperor of France at Notre Dame Cathedral. Now, if you look at this allegory, I think that the figure on the bottom right corner of the figure with the curls and no nose is Napoleon, represented by the artist in this allegory. And since he was crowned emperor in 1804, I think it is appropriate that I identify him as that figure. Now, on the 25th of June in the same year, George Cadoudal, together with 11 of his colleagues, was guillotined in Paris as counter-revolutionaries. So before Napoleon was crowned, there had been this major execution of these counter-revolutionaries. This is a personal opinion, but the representation of Napoleon, it will be seen that he's got no nose. And this is quite deliberate, because in the execution of this artistic piece, and I identify the artist as Jean Cocteau himself, and I believe that firmly that he was carrying it out at the same time as he was painting the mural. And in 1804, Napoleon at that time was not really, even though he was crowned, I don't think he was very popular. And therefore, giving him no nose or not giving him a nose would be suggestive of that. If we go to the bottom left of the allegorical painting, instead of the self-portrait of Cocteau, as in the London church mural, we have numbers 40 over 70. And that is replacing, if you like, the figure of Cocteau in the as appears in the London church mural. And I identify those numbers instead of the physical being of Jean Cocteau. Those numbers represent his age, which was 70 in 1959, and he had already been the Grand Master of the Priory of Zion for 40 years. And if we look at that allegory of 1804, we will see the Priory of Zion represented, if we count the number of representations in one form or another, they appear 6 times. And so obviously this allegory is associated, or may be associated, with Cocteau's association with that secret society of the Priory of Zion. And that is a very, very significant feature of this allegory that I had purchased. I am mentioning certain features on this allegory that I'm describing as 1804 for obvious reasons. And now we have to think a little bit about the coffin that is central, because I see the altar reflection as a symbolic repetition of the French church altar. And we did have in the French church the legs of the Christ figure disappearing, but now in this allegory we have a coffin, and with the letters P.S. Private Zion centered on it. So what did I think that represented? Now, this is only a reflection of, and it's my opinion, that coffin is a reflection of a family feature which is connected with the Fouquet family. And if we look to the right, we will see a male and female figure, and if you look at the male figure, he's got his eyes blocked out. Now, I think that this whole reflection is to do with the Fouquet family, and this family connection with the whole image of 1804 is very symbolic, because Nicolas Poussin painted a very, very famous painting which historically is called Et in Arcadio Ego, and translated that means "and I am in paradise," or heaven, if you like to put it that way. Now, the Fouquet sons, and there were two of them, had been the subject of interest with the courts of King Louis XIV. And this was because one of the brothers had met Poussin, who was the artist in connection with this painting that I'm described, Et in Arcadio Ego. One of the brothers, Nicholas, had met Poussin, the painter, and had written to his brother a letter describing that meeting. And Poussin had apparently disclosed secrets to do with that painting that were considered highly secretive. And as a result of that letter was confiscated, because he described certain aspects of the meeting with Poussin, and he was put under house arrest for the rest of his life. And he died in house arrest in 1681. And I think that that representative coffin may well be housing him, because he was talking about the painting, which has received a lot of attention throughout the world for many, many years, with people giving different interpretations of Poussin's representation of that. And it represents a grave of a distinguished member of which has been reflected in a tremendous amount of speculation over the years. And so what Cocteau is doing is paying respects to the Fouquet family in representing the parents, and also paying respects to, if you like, the memory of Nicolas Fouquet. Now, as it so happened, if you look at it carefully, that reference to the coffin is disappearing into a representation of the Holy Grail. And we are seeing that in red. And we're seeing it in red for a particular reason. Now, it's disappearing, and if you look at it carefully, you can see that there are two eyes on either side of it. Well, an eye on either side of it, and it's disappearing between two pillars. And those two pillars represent the Templar protection of the secret that all this allegory represents. It is suggesting that there is some kind of secret that is contained, and they are the protectors of it. Now, this is a very, very significant point that I wish to make about this, because I was very, 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 very concerned, and am concerned, and I'm extremely interested, and I'm still working on the actual interpretation of this allegory, because it seems to be ongoing. I am not going to presume to suggest any translation of the written prologue and letters and words that are on the left-hand side, which, if you were to see the allegory you are seeing it on screen, but it is as though all of it is written in it's written in a blood-stained background. And there are certain words that you can be picked out easily, but it is a mirror image. And Cocteau was known to do quite a lot with that kind of technique. Can I just remind the viewer about the purchase price that I mentioned in the bidding of 1762, where I linked it with George Anson, who was resident at Shugborough at that time. A memorial had been fixed in his grounds and in his estate, which was a reflection of and something to do with the Poussin painting that I've just mentioned. And in that memorial that is to do with the Shugborough estate, the George Anson is connected with, the lettering is associated with a reversal in a similar way to Jean Cocteau's inclusion in the 1804. Now, the point is this, I don't want to labour the point, but you see, the point is that Jean Cocteau seems to be known and as a member of the Priory of Zion. All this has received a tremendous amount of attention over the years, and people have different opinions about it. And I am only demonstrating aspects of this allegory that seem to me to be relevant. I am not going to presume at this point to interpret the language that is used in reverse form to the viewer, but what I am going to do is to demonstrate how the likes of Jean Cocteau and Leonardo da Vinci, who's listed as another Grand Master, and certain other members of the Lorraine family who are listed as Grand Masters, how they used a code associated with numerology. In Jean Cocteau's own memorial, which I think is a reflection and includes Percy Lorraine, it will be seen that there are features associated with dots clearly positioned in groups on that image. And now I am going to demonstrate how, I've said I'm not going to interpret some of the other features, but I am going to draw the viewer to the attention of the coding that was used by Poussin in his painting, Jean Cocteau in the altar of the French church, in his mural there, and in this allegory that we're talking about. Now, if you look at the top center, the very, very, very top center of this allegory, you will see a dot. If you were to look very, very carefully at the symbols within that writing, you would see a symbol that is like a curve with a dot on either side of it. And if you take the dot in the center at the top, you draw a line to a particular feature within that writing, you will begin to understand or see a numerology that's connected with number symbolism with that allegory drawing. Now, I am going to demonstrate how that numerology is very carefully constructed into what might seem to be a sloppy piece of work. It might seem to be almost a slapstick combination of symbols that have been hurriedly put together in pen and ink by somebody who has a thing, something that he wants to say in the combination. But actually it is absolutely correctly constructed according to a mathematical principle that is within the code of the Byrom collection. And I'm going to demonstrate through certain drawings how this feature can be seen and constructed carefully with a geometrical feature of my own that I constructed based on that, which will be seen separately. And this can all be tied in with the painting of Poussin, because he uses the same principle of numerology. And I am going to demonstrate how Henry Lincoln had spotted himself in his book, The Holy Place, how numerology had been used in the altarpiece of that French church. Now I am going to show how mathematics is an important feature of that altarpiece, where the M featured and has now been removed. And finally, I'm going to demonstrate how my 72 ruler has been used, not my ruler, but the principles of how I designed and created the ruler based on the drawings, and I learnt and constructed it very, very carefully and have used it throughout my work. And that can be seen in the construction and design of the Globe Theatre, in the crop circles, and now in this video that I'm going to show. And I'm going to show you that my ruler can be used, the 72 ruler, and used at the side of the pillars of the Holy Grail as demonstrated in this allegory. And so I'm going to show you my ruler alongside that pillar, and if you note very, very carefully, you will see that it measures 72. And what does that say then? That and 72 is a feature that I use throughout my work. It's, as I've said, the basis of the globe design is based on a square of 72. And here you have Jean Cocteau using the same measure in his construction of this allegory. And I think that that is sending a message very, very carefully to the world through this allegory, that things are not always what they seem. In the bottom left hand side of the allegory, he refers to a sentence and a phrase that says it's never been disclosed before. That's what he means. If you look at the left hand side, and he was known for his extreme behaviours, and I'm not going to talk about that, but I think he was misjudged. He was not considered suitable for military service and for medical reasons, and also that he was a member of the Red Cross as a driver. And in one event where there had been an extreme bombing in Reims in France, he was injured, and when he suffered, and he was quite ill for some time, and when he appeared at a meeting, all the other members thought he was joking because of his known behaviour in other ways, and it was only disclosed by a doctor medically that he'd really suffered and he had been injured seriously. So we can all, if we are not careful, misinterpret some thoughts about how we see a personality or how we see a picture. And this picture is a reflection, yes, of the French Church Commission that he completed, but at the same time is saying a very different story altogether. Can I draw your attention to the M that is in the front of the Jean Cocteau's French church mural, and then link it with the crop circle that appeared in 2022 on Hackman Hill, comprising of 33 small circles. Whoever is responsible for putting that there, and I don't know who that is, they must have decided to centre it around the 33 spaces of the 33 small circles. Now, that must say something, because there is an intelligence here that suggested that it should be 33. Now, relating it to the French church in London, what does that tell us? I think that there is some sort of connection here, and we are being reminded of that symbolic M in the way that I have just described. The 33 is supposed to represent something. I'm not going to say what that is, except that it was imprinted on the front of the altar of the mural of Jean Cocteau's French church. I'm very, very privileged to be able to talk about this allegory in this particular way, but there is still work to be done, and only history and the telling of events as they occur, not maybe now, but in the future, that will complete the picture as it is and should be. But it will be looked after very carefully, and I would just remind the viewer that having used the numerology to conclude this picture, conclude the telling of this picture, I will remind the viewer about my 72 measure and the depth of the understanding of the numerology, which can be used in space. And as with the carpenter who informed me about certain things to do with it, the number symbolism, right at the beginning of my work in The Messenger, there's something, if you like, going on that we need to take very, very seriously, and not rush to criticize or condemn other people and other cultures. We must be very careful about that. Thank you for watching.